Hi everyone, I'm very happy to say hello to you today. I want to introduce to you an interview that I made with Guy Stevens. Guy Stevens is a very known personality in social customer care. He works for IBM and he also does special social customer care workshops in the Middle East. He's been in the market for a long time now. And in this interview, we speak a lot about what's social customer care, what are the main trends for this year and the years to go, and the importance of the social business. I recommend to you to listen to all of the interview because we have a lot of very important things going on. And if you have anything you want to share at the end of this interview, please do so in the comments in the blog. Thank you. Thank you for coming here to my blog today. I am very honored to have you in my space. And I wanted to just thank you for being here. I know that you're a very busy person, so I just wanted to thank you for being here today.
No, thank you very much. Really looking forward to it and hope I can do your questions justice. So,
yes, I'm sure of that. So for everybody that doesn't know you or that wants to get to know you better, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and what's your connection with social customer care.
Okay. So I've been involved with the social customer care space since about 2008, 2009. And at that time, I was working for the Carphone Warehouse, which people in Europe might know as the Phone House. Mm-hmm. And I set up the use of social customer care at the Carphone Warehouse. And so I was fortunate, I guess, to be involved with it firsthand and from very early days as well. So I've seen how it's grown over the last few years. And then a few years ago, maybe 4 years ago, my memory's never very good, I moved over from industry side into consulting. Mm-hmm. And firstly at Capgemini and now at IBM. So I help organizations to understand more about the changes that social customer care is bringing and to help them navigate through those challenges to either set it up or to help them think about crisis situations or the operational needs, really helping them across a very broad range of requirements around social customer care.
Okay, so how would you define the term social customer care and what's the difference between traditional customer service?
Mm-hmm. So I think in terms of social customer care, what you're seeing is a change around the different types of technology that are used. So if we look to how customer service was provided, 3, 4, 5 years ago, mm-hmm. It was very much about the telephone. Email, I guess, were the two primary channels. We're seeing a bit more around chat now. Mm-hmm. But these were very sort of structured one-to-one engagements effectively. And what you're now seeing is, and those channels were very much driven by the organization as well. So if you wanted to, as a customer, if you wanted to get in touch with organizations, you had to know their email address, you had to know their phone number, you had to know their postal address. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you simply couldn't get in touch with them. Whereas now, you really don't need to know any of those things. With social, you can tweet them or write. You don't even have to tweet them. You can talk about them, whether that's on Facebook or Twitter or in your blogs.
Exactly.
So the need for the organization to even be there is almost minimal, is reduced, I guess. And so I think for me, what social customer care points to is the use of these, disruptive technologies like Twitter or Facebook. And we're seeing a lot of the messaging apps coming through now. Mm-hmm. And it allows people, in a sense, to engage or contact that organization or to talk about them wherever they are. So there's a lot around context now as well. So the context of where somebody is. And what that means is that the experience, and I think we talk about customer experience a lot more now, more closely with customer service than we might have a few years ago. But that whole experience now is bound up in terms of, for example, that mobile device. So much of what we do, particularly when we're out and about, happens through that mobile device. So I think for many organizations, they need to think about customer experience or customer service is very much about happening, sort of in our hands almost. And that experience is very different. So for me, I think it's largely around the use of these disruptive technologies. There's elements of transparency and openness as well about it. In a sense, anybody can look in, anybody can take part. It doesn't have to be just you and me as part of that experience anymore. So I think, you're seeing a lot of different changes taking place.
So really social media has changed a lot the way that people reach out to brands or can talk with them.
Absolutely. I think it's very much that social media has been a catalyst in this change. And I think a lot of what you're seeing now is a byproduct. It's not that social media has set out to make these changes. I think they're just a natural byproduct of what social media is and the nature or the characteristics of those channels. And those channels, they're almost demanding that people be part of it. That is the very nature, that sense of community or openness or authenticity, however you might want to, whatever terms you might want to use, are all a natural part of that technology almost. So, in the past, if it was a telephone, if it was email, it was literally very closed, it was synchronous, nobody else could take part. Whereas, take just one thing like Twitter, it's fundamentally different. Lots of people can look in, it's very open, it can happen at any time. The organization doesn't control that channel either. So social has been a real, I think, an agent of change or a catalyst with change.
So how does an organization adapt to these changes, and how can they provide this whole excellent customer experience through multiple channels? Because right now it's true that customers reach out via Facebook or via Twitter, and then they go through your mail or through your telephone, and this experience has to be overall excellent. So how what are the steps you recommend for the companies to adapt to these changes?
Sure. I think one of the major things is that organizations need to look actually internally. So I don't necessarily mean around the operational side, but I mean much more around their culture or their mindset. So are they, as an organization, open to these changes? So, or are there inherent contradictions between saying, we want to be customer-centric and we want to use these disruptive technologies, but at the same time, closing them down in terms of security or privacy, that type of thing. So there has to be a real balance between those two. And I think that is the biggest challenge. I think beyond that, what I would say we're seeing is, for me, there are actually very few companies who are really practicing social customer care with social at its heart. I think what you're seeing is the majority of companies still almost practicing traditional customer service, but on Twitter.
Exactly.
And the challenge for them that you're seeing is that by doing so, they're not really thinking about what are the unique characteristics of these channels. Okay, but they're trying to sort of almost shoehorn or push them into being a traditional customer channel, or behaving in the way that the telephone might behave or email might behave, rather than really designing a service with social at its heart and recognizing the characteristics of social. So I think for me, the first thing is around internal education, embracing all the opportunities and the risks, that they come together. Empowering, I use the word very carefully, I guess, empowering. A lot of people, it's almost a cliche now when we use the word empower. Yes. What does it really mean? But I think there is an element where you have to trust those people on the front line with the proper training, but there is an element that you have to trust that they will do what is right. So I think, when I look at some of the way that organizations have handled responding to their customers, and we see that sometimes, there are many sort of famous cases where we look at the way that the agents have responded in a much more intimate or personal way. And we think these are great examples. And for me, I actually look at them and I think, this is really sad, because actually this is what they should be doing every day, responding in a more humane or more intimate or personal way. And I think we've lost a lot of that through the sort of the processes that have grown up over time, and which have brought, the sense of consistency. So that, for many years we've talked about providing a consistent standard of service. But I think in that very act of providing a consistent standard of service, you've taken almost all the emotion out of it. It's about pushing people through, and I'm generalizing, almost a 3-minute resolution, instead of saying, right, what's the problem? What are we trying to really solve for the customer here? And do we really understand what their problem is, rather than just thinking we do? So I think, for me, the main thing is get that internal piece right around creating an environment which allows your agents, your managers, your senior managers to really understand what social is about, and really leveraging the best of it and responding in a way the customer wants to be responded to.
And how do you create this social enterprise?
That's a really good question. I think that's very much a long-term goal. And I think that there's probably, I don't think there are any real companies out there, if we think about it, if we use the word enterprise, I don't think there are any companies yet at an enterprise level who are really doing this. I think they do it in pockets, but it takes time, because everybody, I think one of the things about social is that everybody understands different things about it. They come at it from different aspects. So what you're trying to do is push through perhaps thousands of people within the organization to have this understanding of social, but their level of understanding, their need for, or their awareness of it is all very different. So it takes time. You can't all suddenly have people collaborating or sharing. That takes time. So I think it's a slow process. It's a gradual process. And it's about changing the way you work. It's about changing the way you think. And it's very difficult to get people to do that. So, it's about training. It's showing them through your own behavior how actually doing what you do can be, or sharing or being collaborative, that the result of that is actually better than not doing it. And you have to show them that in a way that makes sense to them, so that they see the intrinsic value that resides in it for them, rather than just saying, right, everybody will start collaborating today. It's not going to work.
So it's a lot about training and changing the corporate
I
culture.
Think, I think that there's elements of that. I think it's about simply trying to help people understand the benefits of it. And I think, in all the cases where I've seen it make a change, there's often been a trigger point. Something has happened that has allowed somebody to suddenly realize the benefits of it. Now, that trigger point for everybody is very different. You can't suddenly have the same light bulb moment at the same time for everybody. It doesn't work. So there's an element of patience. I think also, it's very frustrating. Somebody who gets it, you can see it. And yet it's very hard for other people who don't quite get it to see it. So sometimes it's about, actually, you've got to change the way you look at it. Often we think in a business situation, we use business examples. But I think until somebody understands it on a personal level, it's very hard to understand it on a business level. So often I'll just say, think about somewhere where you want to go on holiday, or a book that you want to read, or a hobby that you have. And go on to, for example, something like Twitter, and see what people are saying about it now. So where you might go and do a Google search, which is looking at almost all the archived knowledge of everything that might be to do with this book, or with a holiday or with a hobby that you're interested in, it's sort of almost yesterday's knowledge, whereas Twitter is very much about today's knowledge. What are people out there saying about that book or that holiday or that film right now? You know, and often people will start to get the value from that. So it's a slow process.
I like your example. And you said that there are only a few enterprises or companies that are doing social customer service really at a good level. I would love to hear which companies they are, so we can study them and see what they're doing really good, so we can learn from them.
Okay. I think the nice thing about this also is that those examples are increasingly more and more global. You know, and I know this is, from my own point of view, my focus, I guess, traditionally has always been the UK or the US. And as I've done more and more training in, say, the Middle East, I'm starting to see more and more of those examples, or in Asia. So I would say if we take a global look at it, and I'm probably going to favor the countries in the Middle East or Asia, simply because I don't think they get so much coverage. I think, you know, if you look at somewhere like Malaysia, you've got Maxis, so a telco company. I think AirAsia is doing a good job as well. You know, they've been in that space for a number of years. But I would say, you know, if you're looking for one example in Malaysia, then I would say look at Maxis. Maxis listens. If you're looking to the Middle East is really interesting, particularly where you have many of the franchises. They have very complex operational requirements, some of the most complex that I've seen, simply because they work at a number of different levels. They're representing Western, for the most part, Western brands. So it's not just the names of those brands, but there's also the parent sort of company that you're looking at. So there's got to be really great handovers between. So you've got companies like the Altair Group. I'm trying to remember some when they're not coming to me, but that's the one that does come to mind. But, you know, I think, you know, I'd say probably overall you're still looking at the traditional sectors who are pushing those boundaries. So telco, the airports, so travel, and parts of retail. I think there are many, or say if you look at somewhere like Saudi Arabia, where there is a high prevalence of social media usage, you know, there's lots of interesting things happening within the government as well. They're using it in lots of different ways. And if we look at it from a channel perspective, I think one of the big differences is that in the West, and I'm generalizing here, we tend to look to Twitter and Facebook as the primary customer care channel or social customer care channels. Whereas I would say in the Middle East and in Asia, to a great degree, whilst having their own sort of sites and community sites and social networks, you've also got probably something like Instagram, which is growing incredibly quickly from a social customer care point of view, as well as a lot of the messaging apps like WhatsApp or Snapchat, you know, and these are actively being used by companies for social customer care.
How do you think Snapchat adapts to a social customer care strategy? Because I haven't used it a lot. Yeah. But what I see is that, you know, as the messages get erased, you can't really send out a message that's going to be a long-term answer for everyone. So how are people using that?
So I'm going to probably come at it from a slightly different angle. So I think this is reflective of the fact that the whole customer care space is gradually changing.
Yes.
Okay? So when you talked about that at that moment ago, where you said, I can't see how Snapchat is being used or how it could be used in terms of, you know, at one level you're looking at it in terms of, say, how could it be used across the board? So there's an element of permanence there, this idea of the knowledge base, the fact that, you know, we create knowledge, we put it somewhere and it stays there, and then we refer to it when we need it. For me, you're sort of putting it very much in a traditional viewpoint, without maybe realizing it. And I think we all do that. And I think what's interesting is actually things like Snapchat, I think are incredibly interesting. And this whole idea of impermanence, do we need these traditional knowledge bases, which in a sense sit somewhere and we add things to, but when we add things to it, we never really think about those things because they're almost like a comfort blanket. Everything can go in them and we never have to change them. And every so often we might look at them and take some things out. But for the most part, they become a dumping ground for everything. And they give us a sense of comfort, a sense that all the correct answers, all the validation happens in that knowledge base somehow. But I think that actually, if we can free up that knowledge base and almost make it impermanent, because if something's impermanent, actually, you have to think about it more. Okay? If you're just going to put something somewhere, you never have to really think about it or consider it because it can just go in there. You don't have to make a decision. But if something's impermanent, you actually really have to decide what you want to keep and what you don't want to keep. So I think what we need to do is almost forget that something's called Snapchat or WhatsApp or Twitter and look at the characteristics. What are the characteristics of those channels? Why do people use them? And that's the piece we should focus on. So not that it's called Snapchat, but what is it about Snapchat? Not the fact that it's called Twitter, but what is it about Twitter that have really sort of captivated people? And that's what we should be designing our service model on, is those characteristics, but not the name.
Exactly.
And I think we have to make that shift. So I think we are in this period of change where, for the most part, customer service increasingly is happening on a mobile device. So that fundamentally changes the nature of the experience as well. It changes also the idea of context. So in the past, if I had a bad service at a store, if I wanted to complain about it, I'd have to go home, get on the telephone, find somebody to complain to it about. So there was a lot of time passed. There was a physical separation between me and the complaint. Whereas now I'm in the store, I don't like what I see, I don't like the service I'm having. I can do something about it right now. I can get on that phone, I can tweet about it right now. So it changes the. So I think we have to look less backwards and more forwards and saying, where is this going? Because that's what the new service model will look like.
So it's really about understanding what your customers are doing and how they are communicating, and just being wherever they are right now at that moment, and being part of that service.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I wouldn't say completely. I think we have to, more now than ever, really look to see what our customers are doing. Whereas in the past, we didn't have to do that so much. Okay, but now the customers, it's not that they're dictating what should be done, but they're definitely part of that equation now, and they're a very key part of it. So I think, yeah, organizations need to see what their customers are doing, what are they thinking, and there's such a rich source of data that organizations have access to. Yes, there's a sense of responsibility and ethics that goes with that, but that data becomes such a rich source of trying to gain insights and then pushing that back into the service that you're trying to provide. So there's almost a virtuous circle there. And I think we're gradually moving towards that, but we're not there yet. But I think organizations also have the right to make the decision as to which channels they want to be on. They don't need to be on all the channels. It doesn't make sense. They need to see, once again, look to your customers. Where are your customers?
Exactly.
And the same for me goes with things like speed. I think a lot of people say the thing about social is it's speed. You've got to answer immediately and do all this stuff. It's very time critical. But actually, if we look at things like the telephone, or if we look at things like email, there's that same sense of speed. That hasn't changed. So for me, speed isn't the key criteria. It has to be something else. So I think organizations they've got to be careful that they don't get caught up in almost the paranoia of these characteristics of openness or speed. That they can make a decision about it, and they should.
Very interesting. So, is social customer service, because we talk about big organizations or enterprises, but is it for all kind of companies?
Yeah, I think it is. And I think the definition of customer service or customer care is changing. And I think it's changing to one of simply being the way in which an organization or a company and its customers communicate with each other. And what we're seeing is, that there isn't this traditional split between PR, marketing, customer service, sales. It's all coming more and more closely together. And I think what you're seeing is organizations who almost have there's almost like a front line or a layer of social that sits around them. And almost anything can happen in that space. And it doesn't matter whether it's customer service or something to do with research and development. It is simply a layer where an organization and its customers, the people out there, come together. And I often use the idea of the marketplace. It's not a new idea, but this is where people come to trade or to simply talk with each other. It all happens in that marketplace. And I think if we can think of it like that, then it's far easier to try and start to build organizations around that sense of the marketplace, as opposed to those traditional silos. So I think, I think it is for all organizations. It will happen in different ways. Some may do parts of it more, others parts of it less. It may be organized in completely different ways. But I think there is no reason why any company can't do it, from the smallest to the largest. Absolutely.
And we were talking about, I understand that companies have to be where their customers are and have to talk to them through these new channels. We were talking about Snapchat and WhatsApp as the latest of channels. But there's a gap there with legal requirements that I wrote recently an article on my blog on how to do social customer care through WhatsApp. And I have some comments from people that say they disagree with me because WhatsApp is not a very legal way to approach to your customers, because there's all the privacy and information from your customers. So what do you think about that? And
I think probably a couple of things. One is, I think there is a very traditional way of looking at these new channels or these new platforms, these new forms of communication. And I think whilst there is a responsibility on the part of organizations in the channels they look at and ensuring that they create a safe environment for everybody, I think you've got to be careful. Well, I think we all have to be careful that we don't hide behind the legal aspects. I think there's an element that those legal aspects were designed for a system that is perhaps evolving into something else now. So in the same way, we cannot apply the same legal guidelines potentially to or forms of communication or ways of communicating that were created a few years ago. We have to, in the same way that channels change, so the legal framework needs to change. Now, that changing the legal framework always takes time, simply because there are, huge questions that need to be answered, but they will change. And I think the big shift that we're seeing is this change from the organization being responsible for the legal aspects of that engagement to, I think, there has to be a greater responsibility that the individual needs to take back.
Exactly.
So by the fact that we have this shift taking place, maybe from the organization to the so too that legal framework will change to reflect that. So I think it's all too easy to say, oh, you shouldn't go onto Snapchat or WhatsApp because it's unsafe, or because from a legal point of view, it's not the safest of environments. So all I would say to that is your customers aren't bounded in the same way by those legal requirements as the organizations. Your customers are going to go to wherever they want.
Exactly.
So you have to make that choice for whatever reason, whether it's legal reasons or it's commercial reasons, as to why you want to be there or not be there. So whatever your decision is, from my point of view, at least know why you're going to be there or why you're not going to be there. Don't hide behind these convenient excuses. But I think overall, the legal framework will change, as it always does. It just may take more time.
So you've given a lot of really good insights on what the future of social customer service will look like. If I asked you now this question, what do you think the future of social customer service is like, will be like?
Yeah, in some ways, I don't think there will be many changes at all. Okay, and what I mean by that is people will still have questions, people will still have complaints to make, people will still occasionally provide positive feedback. That will never change. What changes is simply the way in which that takes place. So if we look at the changes over the last 5 years, it's not that complaints have changed in a sense, it's just the way that they're delivered have changed. They've changed from being written to phone to email to now that we can do it on YouTube. But all of them still involve some kind of media, whether that's a visual media, a written media, or an audio media, So that hasn't changed. It's just the way that they are delivered. So I think from a technology point of view, the changes there will be changes, absolutely. And I think the underlying service model needs to change to reflect those different types of technology that are that are becoming more prevalent. But in terms of the the basic or the fundamental service activities of complaining or responding, that won't change. But I think where we do need to change is understanding what those new channels look like and designing systems or platforms that allow those unique characteristics of all the different channels to come into play. And so I think the organization in some respects has to be, or will shift maybe from a channel-centric approach, and all those channels are siloed, to much more of perhaps a platform-centric, where you're actually controlling the platform or owning that platform, but you're less concerned actually about what takes place on top. And I think I think for me that's where it becomes interesting, is this shift from channel to platform, and also the shift in the underlying model. Where will we end up? Will we end up with a model that is much more agile? And by agile, I use that to also imply things like speed or immediacy, all wrapped up in that word, or more transparent, more open, more sharing. I think more recognizing the fact that actually the organization doesn't have to have the answer for everything. It's about really understanding where is your value. And I think often I'll say to organizations, where do your customers go if they have a problem? For the most part, they will probably go to Google or YouTube. So why not just put Google and YouTube on your FAQ page, and then just decide what's the 20% that you really want to add value on? And that's what they should focus on, I feel, rather than trying to focus on everything. You know, so, but these are all parts of the shifts that are taking place at the moment.
Well, thank you very much. This has been very insightful and powerful. I think, I know people will appreciate this interview. So thank you for being here.
No, thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity to share some of my, hopefully bits of it will be valuable insight to your viewers.
Yes, it will. I know it will. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.